So here's my reasoning why you should or should not drop out of college. I'm going to share with you my personal journey, what I did, what I feel about your possibility of doing the same thing I did, which is dropping out of college or university. But I'm also going to reflect on the retrospect of that. I want to also discover the opposite side because there's a lot of binary opinions on whether she should go to college, which is yes or no. And I think there's a path in between. So I'm recording this video to talk about the topic because it has been a very important part of my journey. And I know that a lot of specifically younger guys are struggling with this and not really knowing what to do. So taking it all back, for me, I never really knew what it is I wanted to do in life. This was my biggest struggle when I was in high school. I just had no idea what I wanted to do. I went to school, I just did the classes, and that was it. I had no direction, I didn't know what I could do, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And all of that lack of direction, which is what it was, just didn't give me any purpose. I didn't have any purpose. I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I could do as a person, who I am. So the end of high school to me was a pivotal point because in the last year of my high school, I actually began to reading some books. I began to watching some videos online, and I kind of developed an interest out of being able to develop myself as a person. I figured out like, hey man, whoa, that's such a big world. Like there's so many things there and I can just actually become better. And I reflected very early on just on the people around me. My parents, my family, my friends, everybody was in the same class with me. And all of that reflection made me realize quite early that the best way to move forward is entrepreneurship. It doesn't necessarily mean that I had directly knowledge of, hey, I need to start this specific business or whatever, but I did know that I have to do something unique. Like I could not do the main thing what everybody was doing. I could not do the average thing. And with that clarity in mind, I begin to get some sort of more of a purpose of what it is I wanted to get out of life, which was all in the last year of high school. At this time, I had more of a sense of the direction I was going to, and I was studying logistics, so I was basically doing high school, which was general, like it wasn't that much specific. I switched schools one time, but I ended up doing office and retail for like 3 years or something, and then I did like a final year in logistics. Now, during that point, I begin to get a lot of clarity, and the reason I'm sharing this is because all of these experiences did give me a lot of pre-knowledge, which I've used to make the decisions I made. That being said, when I was in high school at the last year, I knew, okay, cool, so next year I need to do something, right? And everybody who I saw was working. Like, I barely knew anyone going to college. I didn't even know anyone who was going to a university. Nobody in my family did that. Nobody in the guys who was chilling with in my neighborhood did anything like that. Everybody was just working or even doing nothing at all. So I didn't have too many reflection points in front of me of like, hey, these are the options I have. But I did gain some clarity. And I ended up being in a position where I was, okay, cool, I can do two things. I can take a study and go into the field of logistics and become a manager or become a prevention advisor for safety advising, which is kind of a path I almost took, so I almost went a completely different direction in my life. But I was either going to go that way, where it was like, I'm going to educate myself in a formal way for like a few years, 2-3 years, and I'm going to step into logistics in the logistics industry with a management position, which to me was great. And I did enjoy logistics. Like, it's difficult to say, hey, I'm enjoying this because you're just doing this work. Like, it's very difficult to figure out what it is you want to do out of life if you're just in books and you're just in school. But anyways, I had two paths, which was the logistics path, or I figured out, hey, I can also go do IT, I can do computer science, because I was already spending a significant amount of time online, especially in this time frame where I begin to develop myself and things like that. And I had quite some early on experiences from just creating online. I started a YouTube channel, I was 14 years old. I made my first money online back then. So I was doing some things here and there. And I made the decision to pursue the IT direction because of a very clear reason. I already had in mind that I need to do something extra. I could have a great job, but I need to start a business anyway. I need to do something additionally. So the reason I chose the IT field was because I knew I would have skills that I can utilize outside of my job. Now, I was watching Dan Lok, I was watching some guys online, so I was getting smart, right? Like, I was knowing what I was going to do and how I kind of could direct it. So with that in mind, I was like, okay, cool. If I do IT, I will learn high valuable skills. That's what I learned back then. Like, I learned from the online guys, you need to have skills. So with that in mind, I was, okay, IT is going to be great. I had one great friend who basically has done that. He was doing it for 1 year, and his brother has done that. And that kind of opened up the possibility to me because I actually had someone close to me who I could relate to. And then it made sense, you know what, IT is actually one of the best industries to be in. And I still think that's the way. If you look at a lot of these 9 to 5 jobs, like the regular things, I think IT is a super great industry, especially cybersecurity, especially AI. Anyways, I went to the computer science with that in mind. I was like, okay, cool. I will be in a great industry, like actually with a lot of potential. And everything I'm learning, I can put that in my own things and create my own things, which wasn't the case with logistics. Because if I were to go into be a management position in a logistics company, I could be great at the job. I could even make quite some money there. But I couldn't really apply that elsewhere. So that's basically the fundamental part of my decision. Now, going back into this journey as well, which is all before high school, what happened is that I had a lot of internships. The degree I was doing in high school wasn't very high. Like, it was kind of like an average thing. So I had a lot of practice involved as well. So I've done over 5 or something internships at all different type of places. I worked at the grocery store. I hated it. Like, I hated it. I didn't like it at all. I was just being there because I had to be there. So I was fucking packing groceries in stores, and then I did some other things. I was working at a lawyer's office as an administrative support, and that was actually in some way very interesting, but it also was an extremely negative experience. It was just so bad. Like, I just didn't have any learning curve there. It was just an environment where I was put in, and I was quite eager to learn. I recall, like, I was actually there to just do my thing. I was not slacking or something. I wanted to be professional, and I kind of did my best there. But the whole staff was just extremely unpleasant. And I was like a young kid who didn't know anything what to do. I was just doing the things I had to do, but I was still figuring out everything for my own life. And here I was with guys who are studying to be a lawyer and all these things. And there was just some parts of it that struck with me where was able to grab some parts of knowledge of what those people are doing. But I also was completely shut off their world. They never really tried to comfort me in any type of way. It was always like it was uncomfortable to be there. And I can even recall there was this one guy, it was kind of like a chill dude, and I kind of connected with him a little bit, very limited, but just a little bit. And what happened was, on the last day, the very last day of that internship at the lawyer's office, I got the opportunity to get a beverage of water, to drink something, right? And normally I can just take my water and all these things, but the way it works is they have, servings, they have a catering, of course, like any company has, like you have their catering. And I was there and nobody ever offered me anything. Like, they didn't even show me, like, oh, you can go here and take a drink for yourself, whatever. Like, they just completely shut me off. I was just doing their task and that was it. And this guy on the very last day was like, oh, would you like something to drink? And I was just like, you know what? I'm good. Like, I'm good. Like, I was there for like a few weeks, like I think 2 months or something in total. It was like it was like one day of the week, but in total it was like 2 months working there. And no single time did anybody try to offer me something or ask something or whatever. Now, of course, I could drink. I could just take a drink and whatever. But nobody actually told me or guided me. And then at this last day, he was like, hey, if you want something, we can do that. Which was the first time somebody actually tried to connect with me and open up, and he was telling me a little bit about the work, and he was actually doing a great job there. So I was in a stage where I was like, you know what, fuck this shit. Like, I'm good, I'm staying professional, but I don't even want to drink. You know what I mean? So anyways, that went over. But after that, I did a lot of other internships. After that, I went to an internship at an IT company, which was pretty close to me. And that was an amazing experience. It was super great. I actually learned a lot. I felt quite comfortable. I even almost had my own office there. And I was still at high school at this point, and I began to kind of test my skills a little bit more because this environment came close to what I could feel like doing. And it was really great. It was actually great. I had a good time there. I really appreciate the mentor I had for my internship there. She was an amazing lady. Actually, she did a great job mentoring me as well. It was, I believe, also 1 week in the day of school, so it was like limited, but it was over several months. And it was great because even there, the first day, they showed me like, here is the kitchen, you can take everything you want and this, and we have fruit, and they welcome me, right? So it also taught me so many different lessons of how people will treat you in different environments and how much it means if people treat you in a certain way. Anyways, outside all of that, I've even worked as a student at this point for 4 years in a steel factory being a student, and so many other things. In the last year of the high school, I also did multiple months of internship. This was the longest one in logistics in the field. And when I was at the end of my high school, I've done internships in like 5, 6 different places, different industries. And I was like, hey, this is actually very good because, first of all, I have no idea what I wanted to do. Like, I genuinely didn't know what I could and wanted to do. But I was super clear on knowing what I did not want to do. Like, I knew this is not going to be it. I'm never going to work in a grocery store. Even if it's fucking $300 an hour, I'm not going to do it. So there was these moments of clarity that began to develop within me. And as I was at this point where I was smart enough to say, hey, I'm going to college to study this, I kind of was in a good spot because nobody really around me was doing it except my one friend, which was great because I had somebody to somewhat share the journey with. But after all of that, my vision began even to become more clear and clear and clear. When I was in the first few weeks in college, what was super interesting to me is that a lot of the guys in the classes, they had a higher degree in high school, and most of them already learned what they were learning in college. I have never done this stuff. I never touched a program. I never did like a Python thing, whatever. And there was in a class with these guys who did that before, who were already doing it for 2 years, 3 years. So it kind of put me in a bad position, but I was quite determined and I was quite disciplined. I was really planning in my week and I was learning and all these things. And in some way it brought me joy because of the progress and because of the ownership I could have, right? But at the other side, it was such an energy-taking time. Like, I just didn't like it at all. And I had to go to the school, and then we had online classes, and the teacher just barely really gave proper knowledge, and it was just such limited. Like, it could be great, like it's a super great concept on paper, but in practice it just didn't turn out. Like, it just wasn't my thing. I didn't like to physically go to school and all these things and just be there and waste my time. Now, don't get me wrong, I think in general things are great, and I do think computer science is a super good degree, but it just wasn't that. And then I was at a point where I actually did all the classes and I began to learn the coding and all these things, and I was like, man, I like this stuff on paper, like I really like the IT field, but doing the work is incredibly boring. Like, it's so boring, and I just felt depressing of doing this for like hours and hours after a row. Now, don't get me wrong, if I'm looking at it right now, I'm working much more than I did then. But that actual work, I just couldn't do it. Like, it just wasn't my fit. So I was then in a position where I was like, okay, cool. This is great, but the work, I can't do it. I mean, I could do it, but it wasn't a fit. And then I was like, okay, what do I have to do now? And I was really struggling for a very long time to make a decision, to actually say, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to finish this, or I'm going to actually do something. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it that well. So I finished the first year in college, and then I went to the second year. And throughout that period of basically the whole second year, I was having a lot of doubts. I was like, okay, cool, what can I do? Should I do this and all these things? And there was a very important moment here in the journey, which was the break between the first year and the second year. So in that break, which was the summer vacation, I started my business. I started a business as a student in Belgium. And that was also for a super specific reason, because I found out at that point that if you are a student in Belgium, you can start a business with a lot of tax benefits. You basically wouldn't have to pay any VAT. You wouldn't have to pay taxes. And you also couldn't subtract that from your income, but as a student, why should you need that? So I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm right now a student. I can officially start a business, like actually on paper being a business, in the most secure way possible. I didn't have to pay rent because I live with my parents. I didn't really have any fixed responsibilities outside of my own responsibilities of carrying myself to school. And I was like, I need to do this. Like, I literally need to do this because I want to start this business. But if I take this gap right now where I will do this and possibly I would fail, possibly I would stop that and then still go college and work, I will just be able to do that. So if I've ever wanted to start a new business, I have some sort of practice, right? So that position of being a student was such a great thing. And I did a ton of research. I spent like maybe 4 months of doing research of how it works, how you can do it. I wrote a whole ebook about it. I even wanted to sell that ebook. I made like 2 sales or something. And it was so great because I devoted such a time to creating something and figuring something out, where that decision was made of starting the business, which was literally phone call, registration online, paying, and that was it, to put it into simplistic terms, because that's what it really is. But I spent months like looking it up, right? And after that, I've started to change the form from a business to being a student to full-time. I've have a new company started up, all these different things. Right now, if I had to start a company, it's like okay, cool, I need to have this, and you do it, right? And before that first part of decision, it took months. And I also think a lot of people who are already in the phase where they have a good job and all those things and they're considering the business, the decision for them to break out of that and actually start a business is so much more difficult because it's not just your time, it's not just saying, oh, I'm going to try this, but it's actually being on paper registered. And especially in Europe, it depends on each country, of course, but you need to be official. You can't just make money online. You have to be actually a business, and that affects your status as someone who pays taxes in your country. So there's laws around it, there's things around it. So obviously you want to do your skills and then you can start your business afterwards, but you do have to come to a point to get those things in order. Like, it's necessary, it's required. So anyways, with all of that stuff, I was in that position at that time where I was in the break. I was super motivated to start my business. I spent like several months preparing for it. And then in July 27 on 2021, I actually registered the business. I still remember it because I wanted to go to some of the offices to officially register myself there. But they were closed and things like that, so I had to go to a super long part. So I called and I could do it online because I was so determined to do it that day. I planned it out. I was like, this day I'm going to start my business officially. So anyways, happened, did everything online, started my business, and then the journey really began. But after a few months, school remained, right? So summer vacation was over, we went back to school, and I was kind of doing my business at the same time. I was trying to build it up and all these things. And then I was in the middle of the first exams, the middle of my exams around New Year, around the Christmas period and all these things where, you have your exams in college. And I was so unclear. I was hesitating so much and had so many doubts and worries. And I begin to realize I'm going to do it. Like, I'm just going to drop out. Like, I can go back. I can always do something new. I can do the same thing again. I can go back to this college and even picked up exactly where I left, and I could just start second year again. So I was like, I need to do this. And I decided to drop out in the middle of my exams. Like, literally the middle of my exams. And I was just, fuck this. I was dropped out. Never looked back. Never entered that school building again. And I was super determined. And the great timing was, it was January. Right in the middle of my exams, it was January. So I was like, 2022, a few months after starting my business, I'm now in January. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work all year. And if I can make $2,000, 2,000 euros in December, I made it and I can keep going. Because that to me was a real metric. If I could make $2,000, $3,000 euros, that's kind of like a realistic metric of what an income would be like. So if I was able to achieve that, then I could keep the ball rolling and I could grow and grow and grow. Now, what happened was 1 month further, literally 1 month further in February, I was able to work with some other guys online as my business and I contracted with them. And I was making $2,000 right there from fucking February, and everything changed. It was such a momental thing, and it was so great to reflect on that because I was in a mindset where I wanted to do something and I took the bet, and then it kind of fell in with me and I got some security even because I worked with those guys for like 3 months, 6 months after that and things like that. So I had a chance to actually do what I wanted to do, and I rapidly went to that position because I wasn't just trying everything on myself. I worked with other people who were also having companies, and we worked on some projects, and they hired me as the company, but I was just working as a person, self-employed. But anyways, all of those things brought me so much knowledge. It brought me so much value, and I've kept going ever since. A year after that, I decided to move countries, to go to Poland, and here I am 1 year later after that. So there's so many things which are the byproduct of the decisions I made back then. And I want to address some of these things about what that decision could look like for you, because there's a lot of nuances to it, right? And what I personally think is that if you know exactly what you want to do, you can go to that. If you don't really know what to do, you can kind of have college as a support system to allow you to just follow a direction, right? Now, I don't think it's bad. I actually think it's important to educate yourself. And I do think a formal background is important because there's a lot of groups of society where you just don't even fit in without having a college degree, let alone a university degree. So there's a lot of basic standards that come with going to college, with going to university, which are great, which are good. But in general, I do think it's incredibly important to do something which is more sustainable, which allows you to actually build something for your own, or at least get into the practice, which of course depends on the country you're in, because if you're in US and you have to pay $30,000, $60,000 or whatever those crazy amounts are, to me that doesn't even make sense to consider going to college if you look at the money versus the value. Back then for me it was like maybe 2,000 euros or something to go to college for 1 year, which I paid from by myself. So these things were like, okay, cool, this is reasonable, I can do this. But looking back at that, I do think it's great. I do think college in itself is good. You can also build a good network there, but it just really wasn't my fit. My conclusion on all of this is that you need to make sure that you're doing something which is actually allowing you to get results. And it doesn't have to mean instant results, but it does have to mean results in practice and experience. Personally, I think it's really worth it to do education, to try to learn things, to follow certain formal paths, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean college. And I think that's where a lot of people make a mistake. A lot of people think that you have to go to a college or university. Well, there are so many different institutions, even online. There's so many organizations where you can follow courses, or even type of education programs set up for people who work and they can follow that in the evening, and all those different type of ways to actually learn a course and even get certificates and all those things. I think that's incredibly important. I think doing things like that is extremely worth it, but it doesn't have to be in a formal class. It doesn't have to be in a formal college/university environment. So that's a great thing which I'm believing in, which is that you should embrace environments. You should try to test yourself out, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And moreover, I think the best way to do it is even to do like a 1 year type of course online, and through that try to get direct work and work somewhere. Even if your goal is the same of going through college versus going through an online education, and you still want to have that corporate job, I think both ways will work. Because speaking from my own experience, when I was in the computer science, after that year I began to have more of an interest in data science. I didn't like the programming, but I did like the world of data science, of business intelligence, and I was thinking, hey, I maybe can go this direction. So what I did during that time frame is I did a few things. I took an extra course while I was starting my business, while I was in the second year, and that was an extra course I did for every week. I learned data analytics, which was outside of a college, but it was still a formal education 1 time a week. Now, I eventually didn't pursue that at all. After a few months, I just didn't go to the lesson, and I just completely stuck away from that. But anyways, I tried to do a lot of these things. And I even went to an online program which was called 365datascience.com, which I highly recommend. And I followed a lot of their courses, and everything I learned from those online courses were much more effective than what I did at college. And a lot of these things were the same thing. But the way it was learned was, to me, much more easier to follow. It was much more constructed, and all these different things just made a difference. So my conclusion is, make sure to do whatever you want to do for yourself. Bring your own path to life, but try to leverage steps ahead of you, which could be a formal education. It could be working with some company. You don't want to necessarily do everything on your own, but it surely is proven that you don't need a college degree. It certainly is. I just want to make sure that if you are in a position where you're not really sure yourself on what to do, try to make these realistic bets. Because what I did was I was giving myself a time frame of a year, and I was setting a very realistic goal. I didn't say, oh, I want to make 10,000 euros a month. I was very realistic and very clear, and that's a bet I took. And I think those are the best things to do. You have to look at your situation. Do you have to pay rent? Are you living with your parents? Can you stay living there? What are some of the job opportunities in your countries and all these things? Because I'm speaking with so many people from different countries as well. And there's some guys I spoke with in countries, and they're telling me, oh, in my countries, which is like, third world countries, they're like, oh, we don't even have the opportunity here. Even if you get a college degree, we can't even do anything here. So to me, that's like, why would you even try to do it? Like, you can literally outcompete 90% of your country's income if you just make $3,000 online. So why would you try to even go to this path of 5 years of education to end up in exactly the same position as you are right now? So there's a lot of these things where you just have to place a bet and moreover analyze your situation and start from there. So that's everything on my part. Hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you have any reactions, any feedback, drop it down as well. And I'm looking forward to see you in the next one.